Welcome, listeners, to a tale of ice and fire. Tonight, we step inside a crystalline fortress where fortunes shimmer like frost and hearts thaw in the most unexpected ways. Will you stay with us as secrets unravel? Isabella Carter never imagined she'd be a guest of Maximilian Frost, reclusive heir to the Frost family empire. Yet here she is, ready to discover why fate locked her in the coldest suite in the world. What could possibly warm an ice palace? Stay tuned. The night is young, and a single spark can melt even the iciest walls. The Frost Ice Palace gleamed like a shard of moonlight perched on a mountain's crest. Halls of pale marble stretched beneath vaulted ceilings, where crystal chandeliers dripped starlight onto guests in tuxedos and gowns. Every surface, from the Arctic blue rugs to the frozen columns carved with hushed whispers, seemed sculpted by a divine frost goddess. Candles flickered in alcoves, their heat banished by the biting chill. Here, beneath the ice walls, summer became a memory and opulence a living, breathing being. Isabella Carter's breath curled in the air as she crossed the grand foyer. Her auburn hair lay heavy against the high collar of her cashmere coat, and her cheeks glowed pink against the winter's bite. She had arrived for the gala, a dream come true for an artist who sketched beauty in ice and paint. As she stepped forward, the hush of crystal-clear air settled over her, and for a moment, every thought stilled, beauty, peril, promise all wrapped into one glittering package. Behind a column carved into an angel's wing, she paused. Heart pounding, she loosened the scarf that covered her throat, willing her pulse to slow. The hush in the palace felt sacred, like stepping into someone's soul. She fought the urge to gasp at every polished surface, every ice-carved cherub. How could anyone claim ownership of such perfection? Yet rumors said this place belonged to one man, Maximilian Frost. The orchestra's strings tinkled in the distance, playing a subdued waltz that twisted through the corridors. Isabella followed the sound, boots clicking softly on the slick floor. Each step carried her deeper into the heart of the palace, a labyrinth of mirrored halls and secret passages. Candles danced behind icy lattices, offering warmth she dared not touch. Here and there, gilded sculptures of wolves and swans stood sentinel, eyes gleaming like frozen embers. At the end of a snowflake-adorned archway, she emerged into the grand ballroom. Thousands of ice crystals hung from the ceiling like suspended snowstorms, refracting light into millions of minuscule rainbows. A raised dais held a throne carved from pure sapphire ice. Legend said Maximilian himself sat there when he made announcements. Tonight, the throne waited empty, and Isabella felt the hush deepen into expectation. Every guest's eyes seemed drawn to that vacant seat. She paused at the fringe of the crowd, craning her neck to see around tall men in tuxedos. Nobles whispered in French and Russian. Models slipped in and out of reflections. A server glided past, balancing crystal goblets of iced champagne. The golden bubbles twinkled in her vision, then melted into a cold haze. Isabella's pulse flickered. She reminded herself, stay calm. You belong here as a guest and artist, not just an observer. A cluster of reporters gathered by the throne, cameras poised. Flashbulbs popped in her periphery. She edged closer, curiosity battling her nerves. One reporter's voice cut through the murmurs. "When will he appear?" Another replied, low and urgent. "He's late, and he must be furious." The words rippled like cracked glass. Furious. Why would Maximilian Frost be furious at his own gala? From across the room, music paused. A hush fell, heavier than before. Isabella felt a tremor in her chest. She lifted her head and saw him step onto the dais. Tall, angular, dressed in a midnight blue tailcoat that seemed woven from shadows, Maximilian Frost surveyed the ballroom with pale, icy eyes. His dark hair fell in a single rogue wave across his forehead. In that moment, the entire world seemed to tilt. A single spotlight found him, and he raised one hand. "Welcome," his voice rolled across the hall like a glacier cracking. "Tonight, we celebrate creation." His gaze skimmed the guests, then landed on Isabella, as though granting her a silent invitation and a silent challenge. She froze under the weight of it. The air around him crackled. Did she imagine his eyes flicker with something? Curiosity? Recognition? He swept down from the dais and through the crowd, each step echoing like a decision made. Isabella's heart hammered in her chest. The music hesitated, then resumed in staccato bursts. The guests parted for him like sea waves. He came to a halt before her. The spotlight glowed around his head like a halo of frost. "You must be Isabella Carter," he said, voice like low thunder. "Your work precedes you." Her voice caught somewhere beneath her collarbone. "Yes," she whispered, chest tight. "I thank you for inviting me." Around them, chatter fell silent. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. Footsteps slowed. Every eye in the hall turned toward them. And in that frozen tableau, something shifted. A faint smile curved his lips. "I trust you'll enjoy tonight's unveiling." He swept his arm, as if presenting the palace itself as her canvas. Then his eyes darted away, past her shoulder. Instinct told her danger lurked in the hush beyond the cheers. She followed his gaze, only to glimpse a figure slipping behind the ice columns. A servant, a spy. The tail of her fear brushed her spine. Before she could warn him, the lights dimmed. A new projection flickered across the polished floor, swirls of silver and azure like the aurora dancing. A hush deepened into awe. The crowd gasped and reached for cameras, but Isabella felt only the cold press of Maximilian's gaze on her back. She turned, wanting to ask what he saw, only to discover he had vanished. Questions tumbled. Where had he gone? What had he seen? And what did it mean for her? The projection pulsed, and an icy breeze drifted through the hall, though no doors stood open. The image shifted, revealing her own sketches projected in shimmering light, sketches she'd thought created in private. Each stroke of her charcoal and watercolor flicked across the ice like a living dream. Music swelled into a triumphant crescendo. Whispers turned to applause. Isabella's pulse thundered. Had he stolen her art, or celebrated it? She reached for her purse, every rational thought slipping away. Her chest tightened as the projection ended and the lights returned. The crowd surged forward, eager to congratulate her. Journalists scribbled notes. A swarm of admirers parted. And Isabella, caught between amazement and dread, realized she stood on the brink of something far greater than any gala. Her mind raced. Why did his eyes blaze with something more than admiration? What hidden currents flowed beneath his calm exterior? And most urgent of all, where would this frozen night lead them both? What would you do in Isabella's shoes? Comment below. The wind off Lake Rutherford carried whispers of home as Isabella Carter stepped into her childhood room. Walls painted in peeling seashell pastels, a battered easel tucked into the corner, and scattered sketches pinned above a desk. Every inch spoke of longing. A painting of distant mountains, a charcoal study of a glacial arch, a half-finished watercolor of frosted pines. Here, in this ramshackle cottage, her dreams took root among spilled paint and cracked plaster. How had a girl from this forgotten place come to command the attention of a billionaire? Her earliest memory was of sunrays slanting through dusty windows onto her mother's palette. Rose Carter was a painter of small-town renown, known for capturing light in bloom and shadow in grief. At dawn, Rose would prop open the studio door and coax Isabella to sit for portraits. Tiny curls framed by morning glow, bright eyes brimming with curiosity. "Art is the soul's breath," her mother whispered as she guided Isabella's hand across canvas. Isabella believed every stroke could change the world. Years later, when Rose fell ill, art became Isabella's refuge and burden. She juggled schoolwork with hospital visits, her sketches growing darker, stark hills under bruised skies, lonely trees bending against unseen storms. Her father, Greg Carter, a mechanic with grease-stained hands and gentle eyes, encouraged her. "You've got fire, kid," he'd say, wiping his palms on a rag. "Don't let the world freeze your spark." At night, he'd tell stories of frost giants and ice palaces, spun from the Arctic fables he'd read as a boy. At 16, Isabella traded cranked engines for canvases. She worked at Mrs. Delgado's bakery before school, mixing dough by dawn, then racing to art class with flour still in her hair. Teachers noticed her raw talent, fluid lines that caught emotion, color palettes that throbbed with unspoken longing. Yet she felt trapped between duty and destiny, caring for her mother's prescriptions, helping her father in the garage, and chasing a dream that seemed as fragile as spun sugar. One cold evening, after an exhausting shift, Isabella wandered down to the lakeshore. Ice fringed the water's edge despite late spring. She knelt and traced frozen ripples in the mud, then pressed her sketchbook to record the delicate fractures. In her mind, she heard a voice, a symphony of wind and water urging her to chase beauty, no matter the cost. She closed her eyes and made a promise, to herself and to Rose, that she would attend the prestigious Northwood Academy of the Arts. With trembling hands, Isabella submitted her portfolio. Watercolors of frost-etched leaves, charcoal studies of abandoned ice houses, acrylic swirls that captured the glow of northern lights. She sent her application by post, fearing rejection. Weeks later, a slender envelope arrived. Inside, in elegant script, were 3 words she would never forget: "Admission is offered." Her breath caught as tears blurred the ink. Rose's health declined faster after that. Isabella balanced studies and hospital visits until the morning her mother closed her eyes for the last time. Standing beside Rose's bed, Isabella felt grief's crystalline blade carve her heart. In that silence, she vowed to live for both of them, to honor her mother's gift and her father's faith. She buried a trembling sketch beneath Rose's favorite oak tree, then boarded the bus to Northwood Academy, clutching the hollow ache of loss and a new resolve flickering in her chest. At the academy, Isabella's star rose swiftly. Professors lauded her ability to evoke atmosphere, icy stillness that buzzed with tension, warmth seeping through frozen scenes. She won scholarships and awards, her name inked in the school's annual catalog. Yet she felt a persistent void, as though her art remained shackled by memory. Late nights found her wandering the campus gardens, her breath blooming mist as she studied statues cloaked in frost, searching for a spark to free her from sorrow. It was during those nights she discovered ice sculpture, an elective taught by a retired world champion sculptor. The first time her chisel met the translucent block, she felt destiny sing. Ice so cold, so fragile, responded to her touch. Each tap of the hammer unleashed steam and spark, and she realized that carving ice was like unlocking a secret language. Her sculptures, swirling dancers, frozen fountains, crystalline wings, earned her acclaim in student exhibitions and whispered rumors of future greatness. By graduation, Isabella's reputation had soared beyond Northwood's frozen courtyards. Galleries begged for her work. Publishers commissioned her sketches for luxury travel magazines. She traveled to the Arctic to study ice formations, her sketches thundering through her portfolio like frozen poetry. Everywhere she went, she wore her auburn hair in a loose braid, her cheeks flushed from wind and passion. Yet in every grand hall, beneath every spotlight, memories of that childhood lakeshore haunted her. In those years, she met Gabriel Reed, a fellow artist who painted desert landscapes. They bonded over late-night critiques, cup-of-tea confessions, and quiet longing. For a fleeting season, she believed she'd found love, bright as dawn, fragile as frost on a windowpane. But Gabriel's wanderlust carried him across continents. On the eve of their graduation show, he left a note. "I need to find my own horizon." Isabella watched his shadow fade down the corridor, her heart cracking like thin ice. Heartbroken but unbowed, she returned to the studio. She channeled loss into her grandest commission yet, a 6-foot ice sculpture of a bird breaking free from frozen chains. When the chapel lights glimmered against its faceted wings, viewers gasped at its emotional resonance. Isabella realized that art could mend what life broke, and that her true calling lay in sharing stories through ice and paint. After graduation, she founded Frost and Flame Designs, a boutique firm specializing in bespoke ice installations for luxury events. Under flickering chandeliers, her creations danced. Ice thrones, crystal bars, sparkling arches. Word spread through whispers in high society, the small-town artist who conjured miracles from ice. Yet when clients learned her humble origins, some sneered at her folksy charm. Others dismissed her as a novelty. Isabella stumbled through rejection after rejection until one invitation arrived that she never dreamed of opening. A gilded envelope embossed with an icy monogram bore the seal of Frost Holdings. Inside, gilded vellum invited her to design the centerpiece for a gala at the Frost Ice Palace. The wording was formal, almost cold, but beneath its polished prose lay a thrill that crackled across her veins. "Please present your vision to Mr. Frost himself." The signature was a single flourish, Maximilian Frost. Her heart thundered. This was the moment she'd trained for, yet the stakes felt infinite. Designing for a billionaire's gala meant triumph or downfall on a world stage. She packed her samples, miniature ice carvings, watercolor blueprints, charcoal studies, into a reinforced crate. With her father's blessing and trembling pride, she boarded the private jet bound for the ice palace. As the engines roared beneath starlit skies, Isabella stared at her reflection in the jet's tinted window. Behind her lay years of sacrifice, grief, and triumph. Ahead lay an ice palace she'd only glimpsed in fairy tales, and a man whose reputation chilled the blood. What awaited her at the summit of that crystalline mountain? Would her art enchant him, or shatter against his icy standards? She pressed her hand against the frosted glass of the cabin and whispered to her mother's memory, "I will not fail you." Below her, the world dropped away into midnight darkness. Above, stars pulsed with ancient light. Between heaven and earth, Isabella Carter braced herself for the next chapter of her life, a chapter written in ice, ambition, and the promise of something more. What would you do in Isabella's shoes? Comment below. The moonlight glittered like fractured diamonds across the ice palace's snowy courtyard, as Isabella stood before Suite 713, her private refuge for the next 24 hours. The door bore an intricate frost-etched crest, a stylized F entwined with polar vines. She lifted her gloved hand, heart-pounding, and pressed her palm against the touch scanner. It buzzed, then slid open with a whisper of shifting ice. Inside, the suite bloomed in crystalline splendor. Walls of translucent blue ice carved with swirling motifs. Silken throws draped over an ice-hewn divan. A hushed fireplace glowing behind a pane of enchanted glass. A delicate tea set sat atop a low table. Porcelain cups painted with Arctic foxes, steam curling from the spout of a silver teapot. Candles flickered in carved niches, their soft warmth kept from melting the walls by a hidden cooling field. It was a masterpiece, her design rendered into living ice, and she felt equal parts triumph and awe. Exhausted from the gala's whirlwind, Isabella exhaled, letting her glossy hair fall free of its braid. She slipped out of her coat, revealing a deep sea green gown that glimmered like twilight waters. Animated projections on the ceiling simulated drifting snowflakes, and soft ambient music, her own composition, rested in the background. Every detail sang of her vision. She placed her portfolio and sketches on a lacquered desk at the far end of the room, then crossed to the window wall. Beyond the glass lay the palace's immense ice gardens, their towers and archways lit by lanterns that glowed like captured stars. She pressed her forehead to the cool pane, breath misting the surface. In that silent moment, she tasted freedom. To rest, to dream, to feel the gentle warmth of accomplishment. She turned toward the fireplace, an illusion of embers, when she heard a metallic clack echo through the suite. Her heart skipped. The door behind her clicked shut. Isabella froze, eyes wide. She rushed back, hand outstretched to the scanner, but the glowing pad was dark. No indicator light, no hum of energy. She pressed again. Nothing. She lunged for the antique-looking silver handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic rippled through her. She tested the lever repeatedly, her gloves scraping against metal, but the door stayed immovable, as if latched by ice itself. Footsteps sounded on the hallway's frozen marble. Isabella's pulse thundered. Was it Maximilian returning, or someone else? She pounded on the door. "Hello, please, let me out." Her voice cracked against the thick walls. Minutes dragged. She pressed her ear to the door, hoping for any sound of a clicking lock or approaching rescuer. Instead, a faint mechanical whir vibrated through the paneling, a sound she'd only heard in her schematics for the locking system. The same mechanism designed to guarantee privacy in this suite. Its fail-safe latch. Her mind raced. Where was the emergency override? In the lobby, she'd glimpsed a marble panel console labeled Master Control, but that was 20 corridors away. She considered calling reception, but her phone lay on the desk, screensaver blank. She backed toward it and snatched it up, no bars. Nothing. She exhaled, hands trembling. This suite was completely sealed, meant to cradle VIP guests in comfort and absolute security. The very feature that promised exclusivity now entrapped her. A hum rose beneath her feet, central cooling humming like a distant rumble of glaciers calving. She circled the room, scanning every edge. Seams in the ice walls, panels that might conceal a hidden door. Her artist's eye noted subtle irregularities in the carvings, but none betrayed an escape hatch. She knelt and ran her fingers over the mosaic floor beneath the fur rug, mosaic tiles arranged in fractal patterns of snowflakes. Nothing movable. A flicker at the corner of her vision drew her to the mirrored armoire. Inside, her luggage stood untouched. She opened a drawer, silk nightgowns, gloves, an emergency kit with a flashlight, spectacles of various magnifications for close-up carving. She grabbed the flashlight, flicked it on, and the lights dimmed further, the projection pausing. The tea-set steam hung still in the frigid air. Alarmed, she snapped the flashlight off to see whether the projection resumed, only to realize the suite was colder than before. She exhaled into her palms, her breath froze instantly. The thermostat dial embedded in the wall read -5 degrees Celsius. Ice crystals formed on her eyelashes. She powered the flashlight again and noticed, for the first time, a small red LED blinking on the scanner panel, an override lock engaged. 3 pulses, pause, 3 pulses. She counted. That was the emergency holdout code, only used in extreme circumstances. Why would someone lock her in? Her mind flashed to Gabriel's old note. I need to find my own horizon. She shook her head to banish the memories. This was no act of abandonment, it was deliberate. Someone wanted her trapped. She raised her voice, calling into the corridor. Suite 713, this is Isabella Carter. Please open the door. Her words echoed, then died. No reply. She swung around, scanning the suite anew. The painting she'd hung on the ice wall, a sweeping landscape of polar twilight, caught her eye. She'd intended it as a gesture to the palace, her art blending with its cold beauty. Now its silent presence felt mocking. She approached it, her fingers brushing the glass, only to realize it was mounted on a magnetic frame designed to be removable. Could the panel behind hold an emergency hatch? Her pulse quickened. With gloves on, she tried to lift one corner, but the frame resisted. She set down the flashlight and removed her gloves, gripping the frame with bare hands. It slipped off with a soft click. Behind it lay a narrow metal slit, an emergency access port. She knelt, running her fingers along its edge until she found a small latch. She tugged, and the port swung outward, revealing a control panel blinking with lines of light. A red keycard slot glowed beside a touchscreen pad. Her mouth curved into a breathless grin. This must be the manual override console. She rummaged back in the armoire for the keycard folder she noticed in the desk drawer earlier, 3 cards labeled Guest, Staff, and Master. Only the Staff or Master card might unlock this. She sorted frantically through the folder, her gloved hand flicking cards aside. There, a pale blue card engraved with 3 icy roses, Master. She slid it into the slot. The console beeped. Lines of code streamed across the screen, too fast to read. The room hummed louder. After 4 tense seconds, the console accepted the card. The lock indicator turned green. She pressed Unlock All Entrances on the touchscreen. The click of the latch sounded from the door. She exhaled in relief until the lights flickered and the console reset itself. Error, it flashed. She pressed again, but the slot ejected her card. The scanner light returned to blinking red. The override had failed. Fear prickled at her skin. It was no accident. Someone had designed the system to trap her. But who and why? Her gaze darted toward the desk where her phone lay dead. She needed to escape before the room's cooling system dropped temperatures further. If the power cut completely, the suite's failsafe would freeze the seals solid. She wrapped her arms around herself, fighting the chill. She considered smashing the glass fireplace to melt a hole, impractical. The porcelain tea set could shatter ice, but tiny shards wouldn't breach reinforced walls. She needed a new plan, and fast. A distant clack echoed again, this time from the ventilation grill near the ceiling. She grabbed a chair and stacked it beneath the grill, straining to lift the panel. It came loose with a grunt, revealing a narrow duct. Through the slats, she saw darkness and heard a faint hiss of air. The exhaust system. Her heart hammered. If she could shimmy inside, she might crawl to an adjacent suite or even to the service corridor. But the duct was only 18 inches wide, not designed for human passage. Her dress would snag. The decision stretched time like taffy. Stay and risk the freeze, or attempt a perilous escape through unknown tunnels. She slid the panel aside and set the flashlight on the chair. Heart in her throat, she tugged off her gown, revealing the body skimming yet flexible underdress beneath. Clutching the frame of the duct, she hoisted herself up. A cold wind rushed at her as she entered the narrow channel. Arms scraped against metal ribs, legs braced against cold steel. The duct creaked ominously beneath her weight. She paused to catch her breath, whispering, "I can do this, I have to." With one final push, she inched deeper into the darkness. Ice-cold air whipped her hair as she moved, and the duct sloped downward, promising escape or deeper entrapment. Her flashlight left behind glowed from the sweet doorway, a beacon of hope she worried she'd never reach again. What awaited Isabella in the belly of the Frost Ice Palace? Would she find freedom or something far more chilling? Isabella tumbled out of the ventilation shaft into a hushed service corridor, breath rasping in her chest. Her fingertips burned from scraping metal, and icicles of sweat formed at her temples. She pressed her palm to the wall, feeling tremors of fear and relief. For a moment, she simply leaned there, letting the reality sink in. She had freed herself from Suite 713's icy prison. Her legs shook as she stumbled toward the stairwell. In the stairwell, the lights flickered, and she gripped the banister, smooth and cold as marble. Every echoing footstep felt unreal, like a dark secret she'd never admit. Nightmare and triumph collided in her chest. What if someone had watched her struggle? What if this was all a test, and she'd failed? At the bottom, she found herself in a narrow corridor lined with staff lockers. She slipped inside a cloakroom and sank to the floor, hugging her knees. The hush around her magnified her heartbeat. Shame flooded in alongside adrenaline. She had been trapped like an exhibit, helpless and exposed. Doubts swirled. Had she seemed foolish, unworthy, incompetent at the one thing she loved, her art? A soft gasp echoed behind the cloakroom door. Before Isabella could warn herself, the door opened to reveal Layla, a fellow designer from Frost and Flame, sent to assist with the gala. Layla's pale blonde braid lay draped over her shoulder, and her gray eyes shone with concern. "Izzy, where have you been?" she whispered, kneeling beside her. "We thought you went missing." Layla wrapped a woolen stole around Isabella's shoulders. Her warmth melded with worry. "They're calling off the after-party," she murmured. "The press is buzzing about an emergency lockout. Rumors say a guest sabotaged the suite." Isabella's chest tightened. Sabotage. Would they believe she was the victim and not the culprit? Layla brushed a stray curl from Isabella's cheek. "You're safe now," she said. "Let's get you somewhere warm before anyone else follows." Yet in Isabella's mind, the hush of frozen walls still echoed. What would she say when the world asked why she'd been locked in? And more urgently, what would happen when the billionaire host learned she'd escaped on her own? What would you do in Isabella's shoes? Comment below. The staff corridor's warmth washed over Isabella as Layla led her toward the service elevator. Her mind buzzed with the suite's icy betrayal and the hush of conspiracy. Yet no sooner had she found refuge than the elevator doors slid open to reveal a figure framed in golden light. Maximilian Frost himself, buttoning his midnight blue coat. His brow, usually a glacier of control, creased with concern. "Isabella Carter," he said, voice low. "I hear you were locked in your own suite." Every syllable carried weight, equal parts accusation and apology. Isabella's heart fluttered. She'd expected fury or indifference, not this careful gentleness. I escaped," she managed, cheeks still tinged with cold. "Someone engaged the master override. It was deliberate." Maximilian's jaw clenched. He glanced at Layla, who stepped back, leaving them alone in the tight foyer. "No guest should endure that," he said, tone softening. He offered a white-gloved hand. "Come with me. I'll fix this." He turned on his heel, stride measured yet urgent, and led her through gleaming corridors toward the inner sanctum, places few guests ever saw. As they passed marble pillars and ice-carved eagles, Isabella felt the tension shift. She was no longer merely his artist, but the center of his concern. They arrived at a heavy oak door embossed with his family crest. Maximilian paused, hand on the latch. His pale eyes locked onto hers. "This must be resolved before tonight's press conference," he said. "You deserve the truth and my protection." Her pulse thundered. Ahead lay secrets more dangerous than a locked suite. What lay beyond that door, and would it bring her closer to him, or drive them irrevocably apart? What would you do in Isabella's shoes? Comment below. A low murmur drifted through the Frost family wing as Isabella stepped into a gilded antechamber. Marble floors gleamed beneath portraits of stern ancestors, each patriarch and matriarch staring down like judges. Maximilian paused before the final portrait. His grandmother, Celeste Frost, draped in sable and ice-blue silk, eyes cold as her namesake heritage. At his silent nod, the door opened into a library of frosted oak. Celeste sat behind a massive desk carved with frozen roses. Even at 82, she radiated authority. Her pale hair was arranged in an immaculate chignon, and her sapphire brooch glittered like a watchful eye. She studied Isabella with an inscrutable smile. "Mr. Frost tells me you took an unplanned detour through our service ducts," she began, voice smooth as polished ice. Isabella steadied her breath. "I was trapped," she said quietly, "by someone who knew the master override." Celeste's smile narrowed. She raised a slender hand, and a discreet butler set a tray with steaming cocoa before Isabella. The rich aroma swirled in the chilly room. "Indeed," Celeste replied, "we cannot tolerate, shall we say, impropriety in our home." Her gaze shifted to Maximilian. "We must present unity at tonight's press conference." Maximilian's jaw flexed. "Mother, Isabella is our guest and my designer." Celeste's eyes flickered. "Your guest. You forget, Maximilian, that every alliance here affects the Frost legacy." She stood, gliding around the desk like a stalking panther. "This incident has drawn unwanted attention. Rumors of sabotage travel faster than glacier melt." A servant entered with a dossiered folder sealed in blue wax. Maximilian opened it, and his expression darkened. He glanced at Isabella. Photographs of her sketches, marked as evidence of espionage, lay on top. Reporters in the lobby would soon brand her a fraud or worse, a corporate spy. Isabella's pulse raced as whispers rose beyond the library doors. The Frost family would protect their empire by any means. Would they defend her innocence, or sacrifice her to shield their name? As she closed the dossier, Maximilian's hand brushed hers in a rare display of solidarity. "We're not done," he promised. "What would you do in Isabella's shoes?" Comment below. Late that evening, Maximilian found Isabella in the palace's hidden art corner, a secluded grotto of ice alcoves where she'd first sketched her Arctic visions. Soft lantern light glowed against frost-etched walls, and a single chaise draped in faux fur invited her to rest. He stood in the shadows, hands clasped behind him, watching her examine a new sketch of intertwined roses and glaciers. Without a word, he crossed the space and set a tray on the low ice table, 2 steaming cups of chamomile tea, scented with honey and pine. The fragrant steam curled between them. Isabella looked up, surprised by the quiet gesture. He offered her a cup. "For nerves," he said simply. She accepted, warming her gloved hands around the porcelain. Outside, the wind whispered through frosted latticework. Inside, their breaths mingled in the lantern glow. She traced the sketch's delicate lines. "I thought I lost this," she murmured. "Someone tore my drawings to fabricate evidence." Maximilian knelt beside her, his pale eyes soft. "I knew the moment I saw your art in that dossier it was a lie," he said. "I believe in you." He pressed a folded handkerchief into her palm, embroidered with her initials. "For you," he added. Her heart fluttered. The handkerchief's silk felt impossibly warm. She searched his face, icy reserve melting into something tender. "Thank you," she whispered. They drank in silence until the lanterns flickered low. Then Maximilian rose. "Come for a walk," he invited, voice hushed. He led her through the palace's hidden ice gardens, moonlight sifting through crystalline branches, paths lined with snow-dusted pines. Each step crackled underfoot. They paused beneath an archway of icicles. Isabella's close-up studies had shown her how light bent in frozen water, but nothing prepared her for this living spectacle. Maximilian handed her a small folding umbrella, its fabric shimmering like mother of pearl. Rain of diamond flecks fell around them as a delicate mist spun from hidden nozzles. He watched her lift the umbrella and spin as silver droplets danced like confetti. "You bring color to this place," he said, voice low. "Without you, it's just ice." She turned to him, breathless. "And you make me feel safe." The words trembled on her lips. A soft wind kicked up, stirring snowflakes around them. In that suspended moment, long enough to seize with 2 hands but too brief to hold, the world seemed to contract around their shared warmth. Yet shadows lengthened beneath the trees, reminders that peril lingered beyond these secret paths. What would you do in Isabella's shoes? Comment below. In the hush before dawn, Isabella slipped into the Frost Ice Palace's private workshop, a cavern of transparent walls where blocks of crystal ice awaited her sculpting touch. Her gloved hands traced the smooth surface of a new commission, a pair of swans entwined in mid-dance. The room breathed with soft hums of refrigeration and the steady drip of melting ice. She focused on the curve of a neck, placing each chisel tap with careful precision when a familiar voice cut through the cold air. "Isabella!" Her heart stuttered. She turned to see Gabriel Reed, his sandy hair mussed, eyes rimmed with regret, standing in the doorway. In his hand, he held a single sketchbook, its edges worn. "I heard about the incident," he said, stepping forward, "and I had to see you." Memories flickered behind her lashes. His laugh in Twilight Studios, his promise of horizons they'd chase together. She tightened her grip on the chisel. "This is private," she whispered. He closed the distance, voice gentle. "I'm sorry I left without warning. I thought I needed space, but I never stopped." He gestured at the swan sculpture. "I never stopped admiring your work." Anger and longing warred across her features. Sparks of vulnerability crackled like frost-fractured glass. "Why now?" she demanded. Gabriel swallowed. "I heard you were here, that you'd created miracles. I wanted to know if you were okay." Behind him, the workshop lights dimmed as the palace's security system hummed back to life. Isabella realized she stood between her past and a future still unwritten. Would she open the door to old promises, or carve a new path with someone else entirely? What would you do in Isabella's shoes? Comment below. The grand hall brimmed with reporters and flashbulbs as Isabella followed Maximilian onto the dais. A long mahogany table stood between them and the sea of microphones. Celeste Frost sat to his right, lips pursed, while corporate lawyers murmured at her left. The room crackled with anticipation. Maximilian cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending." His gaze found Isabella's for a heartbeat, steadfast, protective. He gestured for her to speak. Heart pounding, she stepped forward, clutching the folder Celeste had handed her that morning. She opened it, revealing photographs of her own sketches, every line and smudge identical to the ones she'd created for the gala's centerpiece. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "These drawings were stolen," Isabella said, voice clear. "Someone planted them to discredit me." A reporter shouted, "Who would do such a thing?" She looked to Maximilian. He placed a hand on hers. "We've traced the breach to a rival design firm with ties to Frost and Flame's competitors," he announced, voice firm. "Their motive: sabotage our reputation and ruin Isabella's." Papers shuffled as lawyers stepped forward. Celeste's eyes narrowed at her son's words, but she said nothing. The room erupted in questions. What evidence? Who's responsible? Is this a corporate scandal? Isabella drew in a steady breath and held up a single photograph. An image showing blonde hair, not hers, caught in the studio doorway. Layla's locks. Security stepped forward, and whispers followed Layla as she entered the hall, cheeks pale but eyes determined. Isabella's pulse leapt. Layla knelt before the dais and presented security footage on a tablet. It showed a masked intruder swapping sketches, then slipping away, all captured. The mask came off in the final frame, the rival firm's CEO. The revelation stunned everyone silent. Cameras clicked as reporters processed the twist. Maximilian squeezed Isabella's hand. "We will press charges," he said quietly. And we will clear her name. Applause rippled like thawing ice. As the press conference ended, Isabella felt the weight lift from her shoulders, only to notice Gabriel slipping through the back door, watching with a mixture of awe and regret. Her chest fluttered with questions. Would he approach now? Could forgiveness bridge the distance between them? And most urgently, what lay next for her and the man who just saved her reputation? What would you do in Isabella's shoes? Comment below. Late that night, in the palace's frost-lit chapel, Isabella stood before a simple ice altar where tiny candles flickered against the sculpted walls. Her cheeks still glowed from the day's turmoil. Her green gown brushed the icy floor. Across from her, Maximilian knelt on one knee, holding out a small box carved of sapphire blue ice. She gasped as he opened it, revealing a delicate ring, a single teardrop diamond set in platinum, its facets catching the candlelight like a frozen star. "Isabella Carter," he began, voice low yet brimming with warmth. "You've endured betrayal and emerged stronger. You've brought color and life to this palace of ice. Will you stand by my side, not as my guest, but as my partner in art, in purpose, in whatever comes next?" Tears pooled in her eyes. The chapel's hush wrapped around them, sacred and shimmering. She thought of her mother's words, of every sacrifice and sketch that led her here. Her breath caught. "Maximilian Frost," she whispered. "I thought I was only carving ice, but you've shown me how to shape my own destiny." "Yes, I will." He slid the ring onto her finger. Around them, hidden guests emerged from the shadows, Layla, Gabriel, even Celeste Frost, bowing their heads in silent applause. Isabella felt each heartbeat hammer against her ribs as the chapel doors opened, revealing a hush of snow-dusted pines under a silvery moon. Outside, footsteps echoed on the marble steps. Gabriel stood there, hand over his heart, pride and longing in his gaze. Isabella squeezed Maximilian's hand. The future held unexpected turns of forgiveness, of new bonds, of daring dreams, but in that crystalline moment they shared a single truth. Love could thaw even the coldest walls. What would you do in Isabella's shoes? Comment below. In the weeks that followed, Isabella transformed a disused greenhouse on the palace grounds into the Frost Creative Collective, a sanctuary where aspiring artists learned to mold ice and paint dreams. She and Maximilian walked through the newly planted Arctic birch trees, hands entwined, as students practiced chiseling mini sculptures under lantern light. Laughter drifted over the frosted lawn, melting the palace's austere silence into warmth. Isabella oversaw every detail. Selecting instructors, curating exhibitions in the glass-walled gallery, even designing a small cafe where guests sipped cocoa beneath hanging icicles. Maximilian watched her bring life to frozen spaces, his pride shimmering brighter than any chandelier. He handled logistics and sponsorship, quietly ensuring her vision flourished without overshadowing her voice. One evening, as snowflakes drifted like whispered promises, Isabella stood before a group of wide-eyed freshmen. She shared her story of small-town dreams and locked doors, and urged them to embrace failures as carving tools for success. The students nodded, eyes alight with possibility. Later, alone with Maximilian in the cafe's corner, she raised her cup. "We've built more than an art school," she said, heart full. "We've carved hope." He smiled, folding her hand around his own. "To new beginnings," he toasted. Outside, the polar wind sang through the greenhouse's glass panels. Within, dreams took shape one delicate chip of ice at a time. What wonders awaited the first class of the Frost Creative Collective? Thanks for joining Isabella's journey. Like, share, and subscribe for the next emotional roller coaster.